The summer heat in Willow Creek, Montana was harsh that afternoon in 1878. Abigail Moore walked slowly down the dusty main street, holding a basket of supplies from Jameson's Mercantile. The sun burned the back of her neck and her hands trembled under the small weight. She paused by the porch railing outside the store, trying to steady her breath as a sharp pain ran through her body. "She's resting again," Mrs. Cunningham whispered loudly to another woman. "Always stopping." That girl wouldn't last a day doing real work. Abigail heard it, just like she heard every comment the townsfolk made about her. Ever since her illness began 3 years ago, people spoke as if she had chosen to become weak. Some days she could work like any other person. Other days she could barely stand, her body heavy with fever and pain. But nobody in town cared to understand that. They cared only about what they could see. And what they saw was a young woman who couldn't keep up. Mr. Peterson passed her with a rude shake of his head. "Lazy as they come." Her father must be rolling in his grave. Quote. The words stung. Abigail closed her eyes for a moment. Her father had been the only one who understood her. He had passed the previous winter, leaving her alone with a small ranch to care for and a body that betrayed her without warning. "Need help with that basket, Miss Moore?" a voice asked behind her. It was deep, calm, and new. Abigail turned to see a tall man wearing a weathered hat. His shoulders were broad, his eyes a clear blue that reminded her of the summer sky. Most strangers looked at her with either pity or judgment. His face held neither, only patience. "I can manage," she said quickly. She had practiced those words many times. Pride was sometimes all she had left. The man gave a small smile. "I didn't say you couldn't. I asked if you needed help. Different thing, don't you think?" Quote. His tone was gentle, not mocking. It made her pause. "I don't believe we've met," she said. "Who are you?" "Kieran Walsh," he replied with a polite touch of his hat. "Just came to Willow Creek yesterday. Signed on to work for the Carson Ranch east of town." Quote. "Welcome to Willow Creek," Abigail said softly, "though there isn't much excitement here." "Excitement's overrated," he replied. "I'm looking for steady work and a place to settle." He glanced at her hands. She tried to hide the shaking, but he had clearly noticed. "You sure you don't need help with that basket?" Before she could answer, the world tilted. A wave of dizziness hit her so strong she almost fell. The basket slipped from her hands. In one quick motion, Kieran caught both her elbow and the basket. "Easy there," he said, holding her steady. His touch was firm but gentle. It surprised her how safe it felt. "I'm fine," she said, though she barely believed it herself. "Of course you are," he replied simply, "but I'm heading that way anyway. Let me carry this for you." Without waiting for more excuses, he took the basket. She wanted to argue, but knew she would lose her balance again if she tried. "To my ranch," she said quietly, "just north of town, the Moore place. Lead the way, Miss Moore." Quote. As they walked down the dusty road, Abigail could feel eyes watching from every porch and window. Willow Creek loved gossip. A young woman seen walking home with a new cowboy would be talked about for weeks. Whispers would start before supper. "Pay them no mind," Kieran said softly, as if he could read her thoughts. "Small towns run on talk. Where I come from, if they aren't talking about you, then you should worry." She almost smiled. "And where is that?" "Colorado," he said. "Been moving around since the war ended. Fought the last 2 years. Lied about my age to join." "You fought in the war?" she asked. He did not look old enough. He nodded. "Learned quick there's no glory in it." They reached her ranch. The small house looked worn, but it stood with pride on the land her father had built with his own hands. The barn and corral sat nearby, with the cattle grazing in the closer field, so she could check on them easily. "It's not much," Abigail said shyly. "It looks like a fine place," Kieran replied. "Your father chose good land, strong soil, water nearby. It's a home built with care." He placed the basket on her porch. "There you go, safe and sound." "Thank you," she said, standing straighter, "though I could have managed." He smiled kindly. "I don't doubt that." She watched him walk away, a long shadow falling behind him as the afternoon sun burned low in the sky. Something warm flickered in her chest. She had not felt that in a long time. That evening, Abigail cooked a simple stew. As she stirred the pot, her thoughts kept returning to the cowboy with the calm eyes and gentle voice. He had not looked at her with pity. That alone made him different from everyone else in town. The next morning, Abigail woke, feeling stronger than she had in days. On good days, she worked hard to make up for the ones she lost to sickness. She fed the chickens, collected eggs, and tended her small garden. By noon, she saddled her mare, Penny, to ride into town to mail a letter about her illness to the doctor in Helena. When she reached town, something felt off. A crowd had gathered near the general store. Abigail tied Penny to the post and walked closer. At the center of the crowd stood Kieran, facing 3 ranch hands from the Carson Ranch. One had a bloody nose, holding a handkerchief to his face. "You'll regret that, Walsh," the man snarled. Abigail recognized him as Harley Davis, a man known for trouble. Kieran stood calm and steady. Worth it to stop a man from bothering a girl half his size. Behind him, young Sally Jenkins stood with tears on her face and a torn sleeve. Abigail's heart tightened. "No woman asks to be grabbed or handled," Kieran said. His voice was low, firm. "Not here, not anywhere." Sheriff Wilson rushed in, trying to break it up. People began shouting over each other, until the sheriff finally pushed the men apart. As the crowd broke up, Abigail found herself stepping forward. "Sheriff, Mr. Walsh didn't cause trouble," she said. "He prevented it." The sheriff blinked at her, surprised she spoke up. When the crowd cleared, Kieran turned to her. "Seems I owe you thanks." "I just told the truth," she said. "What happens now?" Quote, "Probably cost me my job," he said with a shrug. She looked at him, really looked at him, and made a decision before fear could stop her. "I have a spare room," she said, "and the ranch needs repairs. I can't pay much, but I can offer room and board in exchange for work." He stared at her, surprised. "That's a generous offer, but the town will talk." "They already talk," she said with a tired smile. "One more thing won't change much." Slowly, the cowboy nodded. "If it's a business arrangement, Miss Moore, then yes, I'd be glad to help." It was the first time in a long while that Abigail didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, Abigail woke to the smell of coffee and the soft clatter of pans in the kitchen. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming of her father making breakfast the way he used to. But when she stepped out of her room, she saw Kieran at the stove, stoking the fire and pouring coffee into 2 cups. "Morning," he said with a warm smile. "Thought I'd get things started." "You didn't need to do that," Abigail said, both surprised and touched. "Early riser," he replied easily. "Besides, the place already feels like home. Might as well act like it." He handed her a cup of coffee and sat with her at the small wooden table. She noticed how he asked how she was feeling, not as a polite habit, but with true concern. "Better today," she said. "It comes and goes. I never know how a day will be until I wake up." He nodded without pushing for more. "Then we'll make the most of the good days and take it slow on the bad ones." No one had ever said that to her before. Most people acted like she was a burden when she couldn't keep up. After breakfast, Abigail showed him around the ranch. The fence line on the north pasture sagged in several places, and the roof above the kitchen had begun to leak during rainstorms. Her father had kept everything in perfect condition, but since his passing, and with her illness, things had started to fall apart. "Your father took pride in this place," Kieran said, as he looked over the tools in the shed. Everything was arranged with care. "He did," she replied softly. "I tried to learn everything he wanted to teach me, but I got sick before I could." Kieran met her gaze. "You've done more than most would in your condition, Abigail. Anyone can see that." No one in town had ever said something like that to her. Kieran climbed the roof to begin repairs while Abigail tended to the chores she could manage. She fed the chickens, checked the garden, and swept the porch. By noon, the heat grew stronger, and she brought cold well water to Kieran. When he climbed down shirtless to drink, Abigail felt her breath catch. His body was strong from years of labor, But what caught her attention were the scars across his shoulder and ribs, old marks of hardship and pain he never spoke about. He took the dipper of water, drinking deeply. "This heat's something else today." "You should rest in the shade a moment," she suggested. He laughed lightly. "If I rest, I may not get up again." She smiled shyly. "The roof will still be there after a short break." He sat beside her on the porch steps, and for a moment, they simply sat in comfortable silence. "How long have you been sick?" he finally asked, his voice calm. 3 years now," she said. "Some days I'm myself. Some days I can barely move. The doctors in Helena don't know what it is." "That must be hard," he said, "not knowing." "The not knowing," she said, "is the worst part. People think if they can't see the pain, it isn't real." He looked at her then, not with pity, but understanding. "Pain people can't see is often the heaviest kind," he said quietly. As the sun lowered, they shared a simple meal of stew. After dinner, Kieran read from a book he had bought in town, poetry. She was surprised a cowboy would read poetry, but listening to his voice reading soft words in the firelight felt safe and warm. Over the next week, their routine settled. They worked together when Abigail was well, and when she was weak, Kieran handled the chores alone without complaint. He never made her feel guilty, never made her feel less. One morning, Abigail rode into town with Kieran to buy supplies. She knew people would talk seeing them arrive together, but she felt stronger with him beside her. Inside the mercantile, people stared, whispering behind their hands. Abigail kept her head high. But as she picked out fabric for curtains, she overheard Mrs. Cunningham's voice. "Living alone with a man and not even married. Her mother would be ashamed. And she uses that illness as an excuse not to work." The words cut like a knife. Before Abigail could walk away, Kieran stepped forward, his voice carried across the store. "Mrs. Cunningham," he said politely but firmly, "if you must talk about Miss Moore, speak the truth. She works harder than any of you. Even on days when she can barely stand, she runs that ranch with more strength than most men I've known." The store went silent. Every eye turned toward him. "She does the work of 2 people," he continued. "So if anyone wants to speak of her, speak with respect." Mrs. Cunningham's face reddened. She mumbled something and quickly moved away. The room remained silent. Abigail stood frozen, overwhelmed. No one had ever defended her like that. Not since her father. Outside, as they loaded the supplies into the wagon, Abigail finally found her voice. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered, though her heart was full. "Yes," he said gently, "I should. Someone needed to." "They'll just talk more now," she said. "Let them," he replied with a small smile. "You deserve someone to speak up for you." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you, Kieran." They returned home with a quiet understanding forming between them, one that felt like the beginning of something neither dared name yet. That night, after chores and supper, they sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. For the first time in a long time, Abigail didn't feel alone. She felt seen. But trouble was coming. Rumors spread quickly across small towns, and the wrong person had heard about Kieran's stand in the mercantile. And that person was Harley Davis. Before long, whispers turned into threats, and danger made its way to Abigail's doorstep. The heavy clouds rolled over Willow Creek at the end of September, warning of the first autumn storm. Abigail and Kieran finished supper, just as the wind began to howl around the house. The horses in the barn cried out, nervous from the sudden change in weather. "I'll check on them," Kieran said, grabbing a lantern. "I'm coming with you," Abigail said, reaching for her shawl. "No need for both of us to get soaked." "I'll be quick," he said with a reassuring look. She watched him run through the rain toward the barn. Lightning flashed, and thunder cracked overhead. At first, she thought the noise was thunder again, but the next flash of lightning revealed flames leaping from the barn roof. "Kieran!" Abigail cried, her heart pounding. The barn door flew open and Kieran ran back through the storm. "Fire!" someone said it. "The horses are out, but we need to stop it from spreading." They formed a line between the well and the burning barn, passing buckets of water as fast as they could. The flames fought against the storm wind, spreading fast through the dry hay. Smoke filled the air, stinging Abigail's eyes and throat. "We can't save it!" Kieran shouted. "We need to protect the house!" Together, they poured water on the ground and walls near the house, keeping the fire from jumping across the yard. Abigail's arms burned with effort. Her lungs struggled for air, but she refused to stop. When the danger was finally past, the barn was gone. Only a charred frame remained. The animals huddled in the rain, frightened but alive. As Kieran pulled her into the house, Abigail looked toward the road, and her blood ran cold. A man on horseback watched from the shadows before quickly turning and disappearing into the night. "Harley Davis," she whispered. Inside, Kieran lit the fire and wrapped her in a blanket. Water dripped from his hair and clothes, but his eyes were sharp with anger. "This isn't going to stop," he said. "He wants to scare us. Next time he won't stop at the barn." "What do we do?" Abigail asked, her voice shaking. "We go to the sheriff at first light," he said firmly. "But tonight, I'm not leaving your side." Quote, they took turns keeping watch through the night, listening for hoofbeats. Abigail dozed in a chair, waking to find Kieran still by the window, with her father's shotgun across his lap. The next morning, they rode to town. Sheriff Wilson listened as Abigail, and Kieran told him what happened, his face tight with concern. "Arson is a grave crime," he said. "I'll investigate. If I find proof, Davis will answer for it." But his voice held doubt. The Carson Ranch was the biggest in the county, and Davis was protected by family. As they left the sheriff's office, Mrs. Jenkins hurried toward them. "Miss Moore, Mr. Walsh," she said, breathless. "My husband heard Davis bragging at the saloon last night. He said he taught you two a lesson for embarrassing him. Others heard it too. He was drunk and loud." "Will your husband speak to the sheriff?" Abigail asked. "He already has," she said, "and others will too. After what you did for Sally, the town won't stand with Davis anymore." Hope lit inside Abigail's chest. They were no longer alone. Back at the ranch, word spread fast. By late afternoon, wagons rolled into the yard. Mr. Peterson and his sons arrived with timber. Mr. Bradley brought tools. Even Mrs. Cunningham came with a pot of stew. "We heard what happened," Mr. Peterson said. "We came to help rebuild." Abigail stared, shocked. This was the same man who once said she was lazy and useless. "We weren't fair to you," he admitted. "My sister was sick just like you. I didn't stand by her like I should have, but I can do better now." Tears filled Abigail's eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. All day, the townsfolk worked with Kieran, raising the frame of a new barn. Abigail served coffee and helped however she could, but the real comfort was seeing how everything had changed. People no longer looked at her with judgment, but with respect. By sunset, the barn frame stood tall, stronger than the old one. That night on the porch, Abigail turned to Kieran. "Why did things change?" "Because they finally saw you," he said. "Not the sickness, you." She looked at him, heart full. "Kieran, will you stay for the winter?" He took her hand gently. "Abigail, I'll stay as long as you want me here." Her voice was soft but sure. "Then stay for good." Kieran's eyes softened with emotion. "I will, if you'll have me, not just as a ranch hand, but as the man who loves you." Her heart felt like it might burst. "I love you too, Kieran. More than I ever thought possible." He lifted her hand to his chest. "Then marry me, Abigail, so no one will ever dare speak against you again. Not for sickness, not for needing help, not for anything." A tear rolled down her cheek as she nodded. "Yes, I'd be proud to be your wife." The town joined their joy. The sheriff soon brought news that Davis had fled the county and was wanted elsewhere. Peace returned to Willow Creek. On a bright November morning, Abigail stood in a simple blue dress, holding Kieran's hands in the small church. When they spoke their vows, Kieran's voice carried through the room with steady warmth. "I promise to stand by you in sickness and in health, to see your strength even when you feel weak, to love you today and always." Abigail answered with equal truth. "I promise to walk beside you through every season, to cherish your kindness and your heart, to build a life full of love and understanding with you." That night, as husband and wife, they stood on the porch of their rebuilt ranch. The stars shone bright across the sky. Kieran wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "They once called you lazy," he said softly. "But I know the truth." "What truth is that?" she asked with a tender smile. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known. And you work harder than any of them ever will." Abigail leaned into him, feeling safe, loved, and finally understood. Her illness was still part of her life, but it no longer defined her. Love had taken its place. With Kieran by her side, she knew she would never face another day alone.